Good evening, everybody, and welcome back then to another LFM stream here for round number 4 of the Case King Pro Series in Season 15. What an opening quarter to this championship it has been so far, where we took place to Silverstone last week for 90 minutes of racing, and Nicholas Hoban dominated at that round and put himself in a very interesting position when you look at the championship standings, because whilst the likes of George Boothby and Luke Whitehead, the Veloce drivers, have been so competitive time after time in this series, lead the way 1 and 2, when you take into account drop scores and how that's going to affect the season as we get later on into the calendar, Nicholas Hoban's scores over the first 3 rounds starts to become a little bit more interesting. And I think that once again we are going to be in for a treat as the season progresses, with some fantastic drivers, the very best on the platform, going toe-to-toe for some incredible prizes. But for the 4th round of the championship, we're moving away from Silverstone and making our way to the Hungaroring, a very different circuit, tricky, technical, twisty, and beautiful in all of its own ways. And whilst maybe by nature the circuit doesn't invite overtaking, these guys in the Pro Series, they know how to go racing, and they know how to put on a show. And sometimes these circuits, which are a little bit more, put a bit more pressure on the drivers to find opportunities around the circuit, do tend to give us a little bit of extra action, and I think that's going to be certainly a very enjoyable aspect of tonight's racing indeed. So a lot to look forward to and get stuck into. Also, fingers crossed, internet situation for this week, we should be in a little bit of a better place. Hopefully we do have Ethernet restored to the PC, and fingers crossed things progress on okay. And a big thank you to all of you over the last couple of weeks who have been very patient with me over here. It's been a tough old time in the comms box, but hopefully we are back to more typical ways, back to some fantastic racing, and it is going to be a joy to see how our drivers get on this evening, because we have seen the fact that this new Mustang, for example, has been starting to build up some momentum in terms of competitiveness over the course of the season so far. But the circuit that we're heading to, like I say, tricky and technical and twisty, a lot of braking and acceleration zones. That sort of starts to feel like it might be a bit more Porsche Luke Whitehead territory than the likes of the Mustangs and the Aston Martin that went out and won the race last week in the hands of Nicholas Hoban. Another car, I'm sure much to the delight of people watching, that could be in contention once again is the Bentley. And I think we have not just 1 but 2 in the server for this evening. And that has been a car that traditionally has had a platform that's gone pretty well around this circuit. The fact that it's centre of mass, the only car that has a centre of mass that's actually further forward than it is further rear, towards the rear, means it's kind of got this very light rear axle, but you can, considering the size of the car, really swing from side to side, apex to apex, and get an immense amount of agility. Combine that with a suspension that's actually pretty happy at dealing with some of the curbs and the bumps that this circuit throws at you. You've actually got a platform that's pretty handy around this track, and I've been able to enjoy some small fun amateur levels of success around here with that exact same combination. So it will be very interesting to see how the likes of Teemu Karppinen, Mr. Karppinen, of course, who's been on fine form, generally speaking, in that car, extracting good pace from that one, has the Finnish driver. And I also do believe Martin Lawrence is in the server with us tonight as one of the other Bentley representatives. So a lot of interesting stuff to see and look forward to, with the drivers just completing their final few moments of practice as it stands. We're making our way into the server in just a short moment and see exactly how they are getting on. And so this track, it is very demanding of the driver. You don't really get any point to relax and have a moment to yourself to think about how you're actually going to take the next apex, because by the time you thought about it, you're already heading there pretty quickly and having to make a decision about the way that you set up your car. It's especially that middle sector, some of the S's, there's a real flow, and it kind of almost turns into a dance, especially with these cars. You know, GT cars, they are agile, they are quick, but compared to some other cars that we tend to see around this circuit, you know, of course, Formula 1 has been here even quite recently, these cars are pretty hefty, and so you have to really kind of nurse them into these apexes. You can't just swing them from one side to the next. You do have to kind of caress them towards the apex and then allow it to, the tires to load up, grip up, get that nice kind of slip angle balance front to rear, so then you can set up the next corner early on the power, carry momentum, and all of that good stuff. And that's what these drivers at the very top level of GT racing and on the LFM platform are so good at doing every single time that we head on out. And we'll head over to the practice session now, see how our drivers are getting on in these moments. So you can see they just have a few minutes left of practice to go, not too many times on the sheet as it stands at the moment. But it is George Boothby that currently leads away ahead of his teammate Aidan Walsingham, of course, the two Mustang representatives for Veloce Esports. And George Boothby currently sitting P2 in the championship standings on those net points tallies. Only 10 points behind his teammate Luke Whitehead. Chicane is certainly going to be an interesting one for the evening. You can see just how much George Boothby is cutting. I can't wait to go for an onboard of some of these cars. I have to say, it doesn't look like that Mustang is pretty handy over those bumps as well. Of course, this car has shown its immense amounts of straight line speed and a very drivable platform from the opening 3 rounds of the calendar, but whether or not it's going to struggle a little bit for net agility, maybe holding onto its tyres a bit poorer than some of the other cars we might have running around here, that might start to play an effect. But I'll tell you what, if you've got a car that can head through that chicane comfortably and quickly and consistently, you're in a pretty good place for this circuit. It's a little bit like, not quite as demanding and critical as the chicane at Zolder, for example, where you kind of have to catapult yourself into the next postcode and hope that the car sticks, but it is certainly a place where you can gain and lose a huge chunk of time. George Boothby shaves off a solid half a second. We also got this man returning to the top split as well, Jack Alexander, the Scotsman, always very quick. We haven't had him, I don't think, in service so far for this season. Of course, I forgot about that cameraman, and it's been a while since we visited the Hungaroring, and this particular corner and this particular cameraman, he loves that bridge. That's that board across the circuit. We'll have to navigate our way around that because otherwise you just don't see anything. But sometimes can give you a little bit of a dramatic surprise when they emerge. But Jack Alexander coming out the final corner, looking pretty handy as it stands in the Mustang. And it is actually Mustangs 1, 2, and 4, maybe even 3, not quite. It's a McLaren. It's in the hands of Patrick Lipperker's name that I haven't seen in a while for Carbon Sim Sports, and number 32 in the server. But has been a very quick driver in the past. It'll be interesting to see how he can hook up this car. This is a platform that should be pretty handy and decent around the vast majority of the lap. Good medium high-speed performance. Sometimes a little bit tricky in the braking zones, potentially. It does have a nature to kind of understeer as soon as you stamp on the brakes. Traction, not too shabby, and because it's not the most torquey of cars, so it can be a little bit easier to control on occasions if you have a precise right foot. But through that chicane, you're going to have to run a very specific setup and suspension combination in order to be hooked up through there. I tell you what, this Aston Martin Nicholas Huben looking a little bit more handy than I thought it might do. I didn't expect this platform to maybe too competitive here at Hungary, but I don't know why I doubted this man. He absolutely dominated last time out at Silverstone, and he's certainly looking like he's going to be a front-running contender once again, as is Jack Alexander. 2/10 up on his lap time at the moment. This session about to come to a close. Been a pretty slippery track so far, only green conditions, so expect that to rubber in a bit further and the times to drop. But this could be the first of our 42s. It's going to be pretty even with George Boothby's lap time as he comes towards the line, but a lot of these front-engine platforms, the Aston Martin, the Ford Mustang, actually drive relatively similarly. And Jack Alexander is going to do a 42.9, so that'll be a nice little confidence boost for him in the closing stages of this session. But right now, some of the cars I thought would be at the quick and pointy and not so much. And I have actually just noticed the one of the names I really was anticipating. He was, I think, registered to join us early, if I'm not mistaken, although I think it looks like he has actually looked to skip out this session. That's Luke Whitehead, the two-time Pro Series champion in that Porsche, a car that I really was expecting to be able to contend at the point of the field, won't be joining the server tonight. So it's going to be a battle of the Mustangs. the likes of Boothby, Bischoff, Walsingham, Philip Menard up there as well. And then some of these other manufacturers, the Ferrari of Grant Correcas, Nicholas Huben in that Aston Martin again, of course, as well, and potentially some other contenders towards that end of the grid too. So still very much all to play for, and should be a very exciting qualifying session indeed. 15 minutes on the clock as they all start to make their way around the circuit. You see in the background, drivers starting to do a little bit of weaving and getting those tyres up to temperature. And we'll see how they progress on in this session. It's a very tricky circuit and lap to hook up. And I'm sure drivers will be looking to maybe bank in some good early performances in the beginning stages of this session later on. And then they might start to ramp up the aggression, especially through a chicane. It's a case of how much you dare to try to get away with in terms of cutting through there. So we will see what happens. I'm noticing, unfortunately, a couple of little screen freezes every now and again. I'm not dropping any frames, so I don't think it's my internet conking out on this particular occasion. Hopefully these heal up as we progress. So maybe it could be a little bit of a server related thing. I'm not 100% certain on that front, but what we will look to do is we will look to see... Oh, somebody just ditched it into the... I think it was Zach Duran that just pulled over. He has indeed. Zach Duran just pulled over immediately onto the grass in rather extreme fashion, but we will sit with this man, Jack Alexander, who will be our first onboard as the cars start to line up in this opening part of qualifying, getting some clean air. And that is the only problem when you're starting a bit further down the order. You get those tyres up into a nice working window, get them in the right temperature, region and pressure as well, and then a lot of backing up whilst cars fight for track position as the first few cars starting to head out on track right now to open up their lap. And you can see the Mustang just up ahead, as I believe that is Aidan Walsingham over there, if I'm not mistaken, as he looks to embark on his lap. It is, but it will be Jack Alexander that we stay on board with for the first lap of this qualifying session. Heading down then towards turn 1, trying to spot your braking zone and braking around the 50-meter mark, using all of our ABS to your advantage. Get the car tucked in towards the apex, foot firmly on the floor on the exit there, and then winding away through towards turn 2. Use a little bit of an entry curve on the right hand side, try to open up the line, coast your way through the middle part of the corner and on the power as early as you can. Need to be a bit more careful about how much of the exit you use through turn 2 in these GT cars, because you need to get back to the left hand side so you can take turn 3 flat. In towards turn 4, blind on the entry, use a chunk of curve on the left hand side. Be careful not to take too much, otherwise you will get the invalidation. Patience then on the throttle through turn 5. A little bit of a twitch as Jack Alexander fights the rear of this car. Busby puts a 42.6 in as the opening bid over those next two apexes of 6 and 7. Now get into the rhythm and the flow through turn 8. Chunk of curb taken through there in towards the apex of 9. Squeeze on the power. Careful again with the track limits as you make your way through turn 10. Downshift. Use the engine braking to get yourself tucked in for 11. And then set yourself up for the braking zone of 12. Again, all the curb in the world taken on the entry and on the exit for good measure as well. And they're heading in towards turn 13. Little bit of a double apex. Not quite as extreme as you'll see from the likes of Luffield at Silverstone from last week, but relatively similar in nature. And again, similar story for turn 14, but it's all about the exit towards the line. Jack Alexander gets the power down towards the line. He is going to go, and Jack Alexander goes to the top of the timing sheets. We picked the right car to go on board with to start with, but this track is rapidly improving as it starts to rubber in. We are now in fast conditions, and George Boothby moving quickly. Michael Moaning as well, the man that made his way to the podium positions last week in a fantastic effort, and the first podium from a driver in North America as well. With these Mustangs going pretty well. You were saying last week about he was really starting to feel comfortable and dialed in with this car. Once again, he is delivering, but George Boothby really starting to find some form around this circuit. He's gone a good lap at the moment, 3-4 tenths up by the time they come towards the final corner. Jack Alexander, though, is moving quickly once again. Boothby, I think, provisionally will go to that provisional pole spot, but Jack Alexander is on a good lap. He is trying to snatch that away, and the Scotsman is finding good time. But right now it's Mustang 1, 2, and 3. The Michael Moaning supporters are already in the chat once again. Always fantastic to see you guys cheering on your drivers, and everyone was going absolutely bananas last week when he made it into those podium positions. Bran also cheering on his lads for Visceral Esports as well. The banner has blocked our view of Alexander, but he is on an absolute mission right now. 2 to 3 tenths of a second up on his time. In actual fact, starting to really close the distance towards that 41 mark. Korekis goes provisional pole by 2 thousandths of a second. Narita for the number 14 car. Great stuff from him in the Nitro Racing McLaren. As now coming towards the line, Alexander going very quickly indeed. It's only half a tenth, though, over Narita's lap time. So Jack Alexander moving quickly, but Narita, having switched over to that Mustang, of course. So the Nitro Racing car looking in good form. Where's Marco Bischoff in all of this? The two-time Pro Series champion down in 16th position. Half second down on his teammate. Doesn't sound like a lot, but sure, the German driver with that number 2 plate on his car. We're wanting a bit more. It's Noah Reeder really pushing along now. And that's a very interesting line, actually. In towards turn number 5. You notice that he didn't use all of that run towards the left-hand side of the circuit. Actually carried more momentum through turn 4. Sacrificed some of the entry, but with enough engine braking, got it nicely squared up, heading through that area of the track. And got a good run as a result. I'll tell you what, though, someone else moving along has calmed the tear. Impressive stuff from him. He goes up into P3, but Aidan Walsingham on an absolute blind moment. These times are tumbling. This is feeling like it's going to be a case of whoever crosses the line last in this session, because this track is ramping up in speed. Walsingham, Boothby, Manar, Ida, all moving very quickly. But right now it is the British driver of the number 4 car that is setting the timing screen to lights. Eric Delfanta, your race winner from the season opener, gets into P5. We might be about to see the first 41 of the session. No, Walsingham moving exceptionally quick indeed. Norida's near there, but it's not quite enough. But I think Walsingham, he will break that barrier. And by just under a tenth of a second, he goes into the 41s and into provisional pole. Michael Moaning, final lap time further down the order as well. 2 tenths, 3 tenths up for him. Henrik Gamble in the serve as well. He's going pretty well. Sam Gaskell, Jens Van Thielen inside the top 10. Really good lap times from some of his drivers. It is Mustang 1, 2, 3, 4, and not quite 5. But great to see the McLaren in a competitive spot, but might be about to be demoted a position because Michael Moaning is finding some good time indeed. We'll go on board this lovely view from the Mustang, the V8 roaring away as somebody's pulled over to the side just up ahead. Number 15 car weaving his way through the final sector. That was really smart and tidy there. Carried a lot of speed on the entry. Got it nicely squared up on the exit as well. So close to that apex curve. Got to be careful with those 2 corners not to take too much, otherwise it will start to destabilize the road. It's going to be a quick time. Top 5 it will be by just a couple of hundredths. P3, Michael Moaning, the American driver, once again looking very quick indeed. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of happy chappies in the chat this evening seeing that coming to fruition. Where's one of our other fan favorites, Team Carpenter, 42.5. These margins, they're so close. Half second separating your top 13 at the moment. There's a little bit of a jump between P12 and P13, and then P13 and P14 on the same lap time. It's very tight further down the order. But Team Carpenter be wanting to find a little bit more pace than this if he can at the moment. We'll go on board with the Finnish driver because it's a fun car to take around here. You can see Carpenter giving a little bit of a drift to his supporters. Maybe not quite the quickest way to go around here, but it is one fun way of doing it. Patience through turn 2 needed. Trying to square up the rear of the car, but it's a leery beast, is this Bentley. It's the middle sector where this car should be a bit more strong. In towards turn 4 he goes. Maybe would have wanted the nose of the car tucked in a bit more towards the left-hand side. Good run through 5. Keeps the back end relatively stable, and you see the way he's hunting for every little bit of track that he can get away with. That's where the Bentley is very strong. Maybe took a bit too much of that second curve, put him out a bit wide. You saw the Mustang earlier on taking more curve through that apex of turn 8. Bentley, that's a little bit too unstable at the rear to allow that to happen. Fairly nice through turn 11. But I do think he's actually invalidated this lap from what I can see. I'm not quite sure whether it would have been. It might have been the chicane or potentially turn 4. As he fared through the final sector. When he gets on power, things start to get a little bit on the tricky side. Although he is going to be setting up another lap time. So he will go for a big exit out of the final corner. For the time being, though, it is still Aidan Walsingham that is your provisional poleman. George Boothby is on an improvement, although he has invalidated this lap. So he'll be frustrated by that one. But clearly has some lap time available and at his disposal in that Mustang. But he's still got a chunk to find. Oh, it's actual facts. Oh, there's a little bit of a confusing one on my overlay. He was on a valid lap, and he makes his way up into the top 5. P3 for George Boothby. But still, just over a 10th best effort so far. Sam Gaskell in the the Lamborghini in the server. Oh, as I think, is he just nope, just some odd shenanigans. Some very odd shenanigans going on in the server with Sam Gaskell's car. I'm not quite sure what's happening there. Everyone else seems to be more or less okay. So we will carry on and see how they progress. Carneter moving along in his number 23 McLaren. As that was Marco Bischoff improving. That's a little bit more like it. Still a quarter of a second or so away. A couple of tenths from his teammate on the front row as it stands. Would have liked to have been probably a tad nearer than he is at the moment. George Boothby actually on a very big lap. As we'll see what Carneter can do. He's found 3 tenths. This is looking towards the front row for the McLaren drive. It's been a very tidy final sector. Lost a little bit on the exit of the final corner, but that was very nearly good enough for a 41 and good enough for pole. But George Boothby now on the move. So is Philip Manar further down the order. And 2 minutes of this qualifying session left to go. And now it's starting to really ramp up. George Boothby is up by 3 tenths of a second. Jack Alexander, though, is doing the same. Walsingham isn't in the quite comfortable spot he was. Michael Moning has done identical lap time to Carneter as well. It's going to go down to the wire. George Boothby, provisional pole, but I think Alexander is about to shatter the hopes right now of that Veloce 1-2. If he can keep it together through the final couple of corners. Boothby had a good final sector. It was good enough for a 41.8, but it's a poor corner for Jack Alexander. He will improve to P5. And oh my goodness, can you look at that? P3, P4, P5, all currently on identical lap times to the thousandths of a second. Unbelievable stuff. But George Boothby right now has found a quarter of a second over his teammate out of nowhere. Excuse me, quarter of a second over his previous best. A tenth and a half now over Aidan Walsingham out of nowhere. So he's hooked up the lap and he's still flying around this circuit as well. And in Walsingham trying to really push the boat out. He is going to have to keep on progressing as Michael Moning looking very quick indeed coming into the final sector. Also, he's got a few more sequence of corners to go in through turn 10 into the apex of 11. This is looking contesting towards George Boothby's lap time, and I imagine his fans and supporters will be on the edge of their seats for this one because their man could be about to topple the winningest driver in Pro Series history, the #1 plate in the server. and see this car go to the top of the timing boards. He's through turn 13. He's still going purple in towards 14. He was so good through these corners on his last lap. He's going to hit the power to the floor in towards the finish line. What can it be? It's a 0.7 from Michael Moaning. And with 20 seconds left on the clock, the American is up on provisional pole. George Boothby's about to start his final lap of the session. So is Aidan Walsingham as well. And the final duel between these drivers is going to be taking place. Jack Alexander still in the pit lane. He will start no higher than P5. Nicholas Huben, last week's race winner, dominant at Silverstone. P6 starts for him. Noah Reeder in towards the middle part of the lap. He's found a couple of tenths as well. Marco Bischoff, his teammates, coming through the last couple of corners. Knocked outside of the top 10 for the time being as Philip Menard goes into P8. Eric Delfandre also slots himself into P11. No one particularly improving at the very top of the timing sheets. Marco Bischoff heading towards the line. He's up by a tenth. He's going to only go up to P11, but we'll turn our attention back to these cars at the front of the pack. Michael Moaning pretty even with his delta. Noah Reeder moving along nicely as well. He has found a couple of tenths. It's going to be very close. It should be good enough right now for the top 5. Aidan Walsingham is out of the fight. He's in pit lane, and it's Michael Moaning, George Boothby, and Noah Reeder. Boothby is down. Boothby is down on his lap time. Eder comes through the final corner. It's a good exit from 14. Slots into P3. Noah Reeder snatches it away from him. And Michael Moaning doing everything he can to try to extend that advantage over George Boothby, who's reclaimed a little bit of that lap time. Tension building in the chat. The number 15 car rounding out through the final corner is pretty even with his previous best lap time. Is it going to be enough to extend his advantage? It does by another 0.04 of a second. What can George Boothby do as he comes through turn 14? The only man left realistically that can take a Michael Moaning pole position away is P2 for now. Is it good enough for P1? It's not. And it's Michael Moaning on P1. Absolutely phenomenal session, and certainly one that I'm sure a lot of people in the chat are going to be delighted about. And he's not done it by a small margin either, in a session where thousands of a second covered 3 drivers together to the exact same delta. Michael Moaning takes pole position by almost a full tenth over the winningest driver in the Case King Pro Series history. He's gone from strength to strength with this car. He said he'd been feeling good in this Ford Mustang, and he's certainly proven that so far today. A fantastic qualifying session there from Michael Moaning. I think that may also be the first American pole position in the Case King Pro Series as well. Could we be waiting for the first North American win in this championship? We'll have to wait and see. Qualifying is only half the job, but it's a fantastic job so far indeed that Michael has put together, and certainly one that I'm sure a lot of people are going to be very, very happy about sitting at home, because that is a brilliant, brilliant way to get this one underway. Because whilst, like I say, Hungary, it can promote some overtaking opportunities, but it's not easy by any stretch of the imagination. So if George Boothby wants to take a potential race win away from the number 15 car, he is certainly going to have to fight hard for it. A lot of celebrations there for Michael, indeed. And also, Carleter, brilliant stuff from him as well. Sitting inside the top 4. Noah Reeder, a great resurgence in pace from him. And the likes of Jack Alexander, Korekas, Bischoff, Huben might be a little bit disappointed with some of their qualifying performances there, especially when they see like-for-like cars a little bit further up the order, extracting pace out of their bits of machinery that they simply could not find. But what a session that was. We will run through our grid in just a second and see exactly how they line up for this evening. Michael Moaning then in P1 for the very first time. An incredible bit of form from him over the last couple of weeks, ahead of George Boothby and Noah Eder to make up your top 3 and your Mustangs 1, 2, and 3. Carter lines up P4 in the first of the McLarens. Great effort there from the number 23 car. That's a very solid job from him. Philip Mannar, the South African, starts inside of the top 5. Can sometimes make opportunities happen. Aidan Walsingham, he'll be frustrated with that one. The first man into the 41s, but just couldn't quite hook it up at the end of the session when he needed it. And then Jack Alexander, again, another driver in one of these Mustangs that had good pace, but couldn't quite deliver when he needed it most. Nicholas Huben, Aston Martin, pretty solid effort there from him. I'm not sure how happy he'll be about that one. The man that dominated last time out, just inside of the top 10 ahead of the season opener winner, Eric Del Fanta, and champion, the Lithuanian, Grants Karekas, rounding out the top 10 positions in the first of the Ferrari 296s. Another one of our drivers with a great deal of success behind him. Marco Bischoff in P11 with Fabrizio Campanella in P12 for Visceral Esports. Patrick Lippiger into the top split of the Case King Pro Series and delivering nicely in that McLaren. He starts P13 ahead of the first of our Boatleys, Timo Karppinen, driver that has had some pretty handy performance in recent weeks. The Bentley maybe not quite as dialed in around this circuit as he would have liked. Janus Reinders and Jentel van Thielen round out the 8th row of the grid, with Sebastian Sehentner in P17. He'll start ahead of the Frenchman Valentin Barrier in the next of these Veloce cars. In the McLaren is the number 9. Sam Gaskell, the man that we had a couple of interesting moments with in the qualifying session, is just inside of the top 20. Connections seem to have stabilised somewhat ahead of this man. Henrik Gamble, the German driver, rounds out the 10th row of the grid with Vladislav Kolosov. Good qualifying from him. These McLarens quite clearly performing nicely. He starts in 21st position ahead of Vincent Proel, the Ferrari 296, number 28 car in the server as the formation lap starts to get underway. The Veloce Academy car, lovely livery on board the Italian Amati De Campo's car in the 23rd spot of the grid. Lucas Roda starts 24th place ahead of Luke Addison, the next of these Mustangs. The number 25 starts in P25 ahead of Sasha Vassner. He starts in 26th place ahead of Krzysztof Makowski, another one of the Aston Martins, on the 14th row of the grid. And joining him there is Andrei Poznikov in the last of the Honda NSXs in the server. The last of our Boatleys rounded out by Martin Lawrence in the number 26 car, just ahead of Fabio Steyer, who will make up your top 30 and makes it 1 Porsche in the server for this evening. Zach Duran, your penultimate finisher of that qualifying session. He'll be cheering on his compatriot at the other end of the grid, I am sure. And then Lucas Schneckenberger rounding out the order in 32nd place. And that is how they sit on the grid for this evening. But Michael Moning, an immense qualifying performance from him. And now 60 minutes worth of racing to try to get the job done and make it a debut win in the Case King Pro Series. But that is not going to be easy because he has George Boothby, the winningest driver in Case King Pro Series history, on his gearbox for the start of this race. And Boothby, he's been chasing this title for a while. It hasn't come his way, which, considering some of his other statistics, seems almost ludicrous. But it is still a championship that currently eludes him, despite his very decorated nature within the sim racing and ACC community. So he'll be giving it everything, I have no doubt. Michael Moning knows that as well, but he is going to be on for a blinder, I am sure. And looking in the chat, Luke unfortunately missing this one because he has his holiday. Hope you have a lovely holiday, buddy. Always a pleasure to talk to you and see you out on the track as well. And can't wait for you to be back on the grid this evening. And this evening, next week. Already get ahead of myself, Luke. But wonderful to have you in the chat with us for tonight and watching on as well. And we'll see how it all plays out for this one. 60 minutes then on the clock, separating Michael Moning from pole position conversion on what could be an incredible day for himself and North America in the Case King Pro Series. But he's got a tough old task ahead of him with a whole field of incredibly feisty drivers behind. Red lights ahead of him, but it's going to turn green in just a moment, and it's lights out and waving. It's a good even start from the two Mustangs at the front of the order. Michael Moning with the inside line towards turn one, under pressure from the cars behind, but I think if he gets his braking point spotted and sorted, he should be okay on the exit. No Rita giving some trouble to George Boothby, and Michael Moning is indeed away, and it's Ida versus Boothby as they head on the run towards turn two. Clean for the field through the first corner, and that's Ida trying to go all the way around the outside. You can pull it off in Formula 1, but I'm not so sure in the GT cars, and in actual fact it has cost him. Carliter trying to sneak up into the podium positions, and Walsingham applying the pressure to Philip Menard just behind as they all head on through, and there is yellow flags further down the order, but it is Michael Moning that leads away. Fabio Steyer, the lone Porsche in the server, is around, but he is going to get it going once again. But Moning leads then by half a second as they head in towards this twisty middle sector of the lap for the very first time. Neat and tidy from a few. Will anyone get caught out in the opening part of the race? And that's Walsingham, in actual fact, making his way past Philip Menard, who I think did make a mistake there under pressure. Walsingham sent towards the outside line. The South African trying to keep him honest through his next series of corners. Alexander, who was out? That was Human to his outside, I believe. Big tag to the left-hand side. Not sure in actual fact. It's Alexander under pressure from the Aston behind. Philip Menard sent to the outside line. They're bored in the way as we then head towards a penultimate turn. Philip Menard, though, unable to reclaim the position on the British driver, who moves up into P5 and sets his sights towards the front of the grid. But Michael Moning already 0.6 of a second clear of the cars behind. Great starts from the pole centre. Campanella and Del Fanta side by side on the exit. Lamborghini versus Honda. Advantage is towards Honda, and Carpenter got all sorts of squiffy on the exit. The final turn, but he's got a good run heading in towards the first turn. It could be 3 wide. Fireworks kicking off already here as we go in towards turn 1. Who's going to come on top of all of this? Campanella having to fend from Marco Bischoff, manages to make that one happen. And Carpenter, how's he fare? Sent towards the outside line, but his momentum once again in favour of the Bentley towards the inside line. He will look to go. Bischoff scrambling away. That's not the camera angle I wanted. As we then head through there, Carpenter, I think, has made it stick. He has, just in the background, as Marco Bischoff has to concede again to the Lamborghini, but Timo Carpenter gets the job done on Valentin Barrier and now sets off in sight of the Mustang ahead. But you can see Valentin under pressure, in trouble here, as that's Yanis Reinders trying to make his way through to the inside with Henrik Gamble in the BMW behind, also having to defend from the Ferrari 296 in towards the chicane. Once again they go. Anyone victim to the bumps this time around? Not quite, although there was some shenanigans in the background. Patrick Lipka, I think, gaining position. Luke Addison making a mistake through. Although, in actual fact, Lipka has dropped 9 positions, so maybe it was a mistake from the McLaren driver. Despite that decent qualifying performance, number 32 car hasn't had the easiest opening couple laps in this race, but at the front of the pack by almost a full second, Michael Moning is pulling away from the field as Boothby happened to look a little bit into his rear view mirrors towards Noah Reeder, and they're scrabbling away there as well. Lucas Roda, Sebastian Zahenna and Sam Gaskell side by side through turn 13. On the inside, the Lamborghini now goes. How does Matty DeCampo fancy getting involved in this one? Tries to get towards the inside. Out of the final corner, Lamborghini takes a position for the time being on the exit as we now head towards turn 1. Some drag races starting to kick off. Drivers trying to find which position to take on the entry to the braking zone. Reinders and Barrier scrapping away up ahead as well. The Mustang was sent towards the outside, couldn't get it stuck. And then the yellow flag comes out now for Luke Addison and Patrick Lipka as well. Something has gone on towards the first turn, and we'll try to see we can work out what has happened there. No other changes for position, I don't believe. So what has happened for the South African? So towards turn 1 we go. Oh, I can't click on his car. There we go. We can get to Lipka though at least. So Lipka in towards turn 1 as Luke Addison. Oh dear. Well, that's rather unfortunate now, isn't it? Yeah. So Luke Addison looked like he kind of went a bit deep, got caught out by the car ahead, and then stomped on the brakes Oh, as Marco Bischoff is tumbling down the order. What has happened to the two-time Pro Series champion? The number 2 car off on the exit of turn number 8, I think. Turn 7, excuse me. That's a very odd place for the car to have let go there. So has there been contact? Has a curb sent him off the circuit? He's pretty much on his own. In relative terms for the Pro Series anyway, you can see there's some action behind. So through here he goes. First curb okay. Second, oh, big kangaroo jump over that curb. And the car's sent left, right, and centre. There was Reinders side by side on the exit through turn 5. Then had to take to the grass through the chicane. And then Marco Bischoff taking an awful long time to get going again. And the Team Nitro car, the number 2 car in the server, running into trouble, and now all the way down in P30. Frustration from him, but opportunity for Next Neo N Racing. Vincent Proel towards the outside of turn 1. Couldn't get the job done there, but he's got to be careful because here comes Janus Reinders. Already has shown his nose a couple of times in this fight. Trying to do it again around the outside. It's difficult to make that one stick, and Sam Gaskell might have something to say about that as well. In the Lamborghini, takes the inside, becomes the outside, tries to carry the momentum through turn 3, then up towards 4 they go. Moving one way, moving the other. Got to be careful not to change direction on too many occasions, but they stay as they were. I'll also tell you, inside of the top 10, gaps have started to emerge, and Busby not quite sticking with Michael Moaning as it stands. Ruben Korekas suddenly closing the gap to Jack Alexander, maybe a Paul chicane for the Scotsman as they continue on. There's a lot of scrapping up and down the order. There's also a fight just behind this as well. Jentel Van Thielen seems to have made his way through in the 296, battling with Sasha Vassner, who was up 4 positions. You can see there's some damage, quite a bit of damage on the front end of that Ferrari. Jentel looks like he's been in the walls just a little bit. And just behind this battle as well, we've got the likes of Lucas Schneckenberger. He has gained 8 places so far this race. Started nearly at the very back of the grid. Sonny won alongside Lucas Roder. Henry Gamble as well to watch out, going for that Jardier trophy for this evening. For those that don't know, for those that may be new, first of all, welcome to the world and chaotic and beautiful land of Low Fuels Motorsport and the Case King Pro Series. If you are enjoying the crazy action that Hungaroring is putting on, then do consider giving the channel a follow, because I guarantee you the racing is as chaotic and incredible as this every single week that we go racing this fantastic championship. So do stick around as a little bit of fighting here. Pozniakov versus Duran. In towards turn 2 they go. Pozniakov with the run on the outside again, though. Loses the grip. You just can't quite do it. In Formula 1, it's quite a common move around the outside there here at Hungary. It's one of the opportunities that you can get done. But these GT cars, unless you have a major tyre advantage, not easy opportunities. But as we round back to the previous points, if you are new to the Case King Pro Series, you may wonder, what is the Jardier Trophy? Well, the beloved streamer who isn't in the server for this evening has rather had a habit over the last couple of seasons of not delivering his absolute best in a qualifying performance, but has always been one to move his way up through the order, as Schneckenberger trying to make it 9 positions gained in this race. Bukowski putting him under a great deal of pressure. Through turn 10 they go. That will cover off the position into 11. So the Lamborghini driver will have to find another opportunity elsewhere on circuit. But he is looking feisty for this evening. And there we go. Next corner immediately on the tag. Just about enough room given for the Lamborghini. How's he fare in towards 13? Trying to go all the way around the outside, seeing if he can keep the nose in a place for the final corner. Can't. And he needs to be careful, because just behind, there we go, Pozniakov and Duran. Although I think Duran's got bigger problems right now. That's Pozniakov sending out the inside in towards the final corner. And there'll be a drag race between those two. But Jardier, who so often has moved his way up through the order in these races, and Martin Lawrence trying to make it 3 wide in towards turn 1. Pozniakov sent him from downtown as the exit from Duran was trying to be set up. I thought there was going to be contact there on the apex between Lawrence and Duran, but Pozniakov somehow manages to get the Honda stops just about in time and does it get the position sorted. But Jardier, his reputation for using all that racecraft and experience, so often one of the biggest movers on the grid. So we did name this little fictional trophy after that man. as that's a wide moment for Duran. Can't afford to do that on too many occasions, otherwise he could get track limit warnings. And suddenly now, inside the top 10, Niklas Hoban struggling a little bit to keep Grantas Carrecas at bay, it seems. Not a great lap from last week's winner, as Serena has had an issue further down the order. What has happened there? And he is losing a lot of positions all the way down. Malores, and that looks like that could be race done and dusted for the Aston Martin driver. Let's see. And Jendel Van Thielen behind. I'd be surprised if these two made contact, though, under braking from that distance. So is it this pesky chicane once again? The first apex fine, the second one was fine. Oh, now the distance starts to close. There it is. Well, that was the commentator curse. That's, oh my goodness, and Sasha Vassner, you lucky man. He did manage to keep it all together and squeeze his way through there. I do wonder if there'll be a little bit of a word from the stewards there with Zahender about not holding the brakes. He might have been on the brakes, of course. Can't quite see his inputs from where we are, so I won't judge it too harshly. They've got better camera angles than I do, but that very nearly saw Vassner taken out of the equation. Did very well squeeze on through. Meanwhile, Rangers, once again, he's been trying to make this move lap after lap, but unfortunately the other thing that does is allows Proel to learn how to defend, but this time around it might not quite be good enough because the Mustang's got a hell of a run, but the inside line is still in favour of the 296, but he backs out of it. Vincent Proel tucks under the rear wing of the Mustang, and that's a poor run through there. Sudden jump back, and now it opens up the opportunity for Sam Gaskell trying to run it all the way around the outside of turn 5. A little bit of a wiggle, but surely can't go around the outside in towards the chicane. He can't. But Matty DeCampo fancies a piece of this, but this Ferrari seemingly feeling very unsettled. I think Vincent Proel a bit flapped by the battling that's taken place, making a few mistakes, and this is just a circuit that really punishes those errors. And there's a 10-second stop-go penalty for Patrick Lipka, for that contact. And, of course, I think he already brought his race to an end already. But that is certainly salt in the wound for that one. These three having a fantastic scrap further down the order. We will check and see what other stewards' inquiries there may have been. Our wonderful live stewards that go to such great efforts to keep this racing under great scrutiny. Make sure these guys race fairly. These two, Hoban and Carrecas, pretty close on track as well. But that 296, it just has very poor acceleration and straight line speed. And while the Aston Martin isn't great at that, it is definitely better than the prancing horse, who was able to keep the champion from a few seasons ago behind. Meanwhile, of course, remember Niklas Hoban, you know, it's not exactly a surprise about the level of form that he brought last week. He very nearly was a champion many seasons ago and almost managed to do it without actually winning a single race. Over the course of the season, he was Mr. Consistency, and he did certainly give it everything at Monza in the final round. In actual fact, so much so that yours truly was left rather uncertain to exactly who had taken that championship by the time we got to the end of that race, but it was snatched away from him. But he is certainly familiar with being able to contest at the pointy end of the grid and fight for championships at the end of this 12-race season. Right now, though, his focus is on the man that sits directly behind him, Grantas Carrecas, the Lithuanian. Looking at our stewarding board, had a warning for the number 21 car for avoidable contact. That was for Van Thielen, and maybe rather responsible for that damage we saw on the front end prior to that other contact that came on through. I think a penalty that wasn't dished out because someone left the server. And then we've got a couple of other things under investigation as well. So we'll see how all that plays out. Sam Gaskell then still applying the pressure to the back of Vincent Proel in that Ferrari. But he's got to be careful of the McLaren. You can see just in that little digital mirror hanging down above the windscreen. Although the McLaren whoop, phased out of existence. I do believe he's still there, just out of the render distance. But Gaskell then building up momentum in this Lamborghini. He has sent it down the inside. He's given a little bit of racing room. I don't think he quite entitled himself to that, but I think Vincent Proel trying to play it safer than not, but he's got that inside line in towards turn 2. He's defended this so many times, and surely he will again. I don't imagine he's going to be all too kind to Gaskell here. He's actually been immensely respectful, and exactly the same way he lost it a moment ago, he has that position taken away from him for the second time through turn 3, and Sam Gaskell then makes his way on through. Hard, but I suppose overall relatively fair racing. You know, I don't really feel like the Lamborghini entitled himself to that room. If there have been contacts, I would have said that it would have been fair for a penalty to come his way. Here's Van Thielen trying to show his nose up the inside of De Campo. Well, that's one way to take the corner as he skips the second part of the chicane. That will undoubtedly be a track warning for that one as they progress on through. But yes, if that gap had been closed, which I think it had which it could have rightfully done, that I wouldn't have been surprised if it may have been like a warning if there was maybe a half-spin bit of contact or a 5-second time penalty potentially. So that is the risk that you run with that sort of move, but it worked out for the Lamborghini driver on this occasion. So these guys continue to scrap away. De Campo, again, immediately under pressure. Excuse me, that is Proel immediately under pressure from De Campo with Jens Van Thielen in tow as well. As Grant Carreras very, very close to the back of Huben. He's bringing Eric Del Fanta along with him as well. He's been lapping very quickly. Good chunk quicker, actually, than most of the cars ahead, other than Walsingham, Boothby, and Moaning. Worth noting now, the top two have actually really started to stretch their legs. Have opened up a 2-second gap to the P3 car of Noah Reeder. Walsingham ramping up the pace as well at similar sorts of level. He sits P5 and just behind Canter in the McLaren. So the Mustangs looking like they are pretty handy as it stands. Looking at the chat, yeah, I mean, I think in terms of BOP work, it's one of those things which is always very, very difficult to make everyone happy. That's that's an ambitious move to the inside and a late defense from Nicholas Huben as well. I think just about on the line of fairness, but Huben now really starting to come under pressure from the Ferrari driver. But yeah, there's an immense amount of work that goes on behind the scenes in trying to get this custom BOP into a good place that allows all these cars to be in a closer set of competition. Sometimes we will end up going to circuits where one car still ends up standing out somewhat. It's a very tricky one. It's almost an impossible task, but a lot of hard work, both from you guys in the community and those behind the scenes, the hidden heroes at LFM as well. Put so much work into making it possible. Just under 18 minutes into this race then, a chaotic opener to this one, the 4th round of the season it has been, and it's continuing that way. And Walsingham applying the pressure to the back of Carl as the battle for P4 continues to kick off. As it stands, McLaren holding on to this gap for the time being, and imagine partly as a result of the medium speed performance and capability elsewhere in the lap. It's over the curbs, the straight line speed, that's where this Mustang is immensely strong, and that seems to be where Aiden is reeling in the distance as Van Thielen has made his way on by Matty De Campo further down the order. I've then had a complete futtock at my end, so we'll just have to go on board with that for time being. So I didn't quite manage to get the overlay up, apologies on that front, but you can see that Van Thielen got the job done through turn 2 into 3, and now sets his sights off further ahead, although it's all kicking off behind as Sasha Vasten looking for an opportunity to make his way past De Campo. We just feel like when you get overtaken around here, you get put offline, maybe pick up a little bit of the marbles and start to lose your rhythm. This way this snowballs further down the order, and yeah, very tricky ones to kind of pick up and regather yourself on real art to managing to keep everything together when you are under pressure in these highly competitive races. Best then for Mr. Carpet to come in on this lap. If he did so, he'd be going for a pretty aggressive undercut. Excuse me, the next lap. He'd be going for a pretty aggressive undercut, which especially in this Bentley, I think might be an interesting one. There's a dive and a half from Aiden Walsingham. Has he made it stick? I think he might have done, especially with the top speed that this Mustang has, and he has made it stick indeed. Aiden Walsingham then, a driver that was looking like he could I don't even want to say sort of comfortably going for pole position, but he certainly was looking in a good spot. Gets himself up into P4, and you can see that Mustang, an absolute weapon in a straight line, and then comes all the way down the inside, just about get it parked on the exit of the corner, and that McLaren just nowhere near enough torque and power to offset the pace of Aidan Walsingham there on the exit of turn 1. And so it did then go the way of the British driver. Michael Moning leads by a second, and he's still moving quickly. 42.2 on the last lap of the race. Not by the fastest lap of the race, but only short of it by a few hundredths of a second, as a pit window has now opened. So we shall see how that comes into effect, because how many drivers will pit on the earlier side. The Bentley, I'm not sure how much of a good option it is to pit early here, because it will chew through its tyres, especially the rears, somewhat. I'm just not quite sure they will survive from this early on. We will see if Carlo's predictions, our wonderful statistician in the chat, who gives us all these little extra snippets of info, adding to our wonderful experience. And oh my goodness, he was right. Carlo, and I don't even know why I doubted you. I still kind of doubt the strategy, but I shouldn't have doubted you. How dare I? Timo Karppinen then comes into pit lane, and the reason being for that undercut, he wants track position, as Jensel Van Thielen comes into pit lane, as well as Jack Alexander seemingly has made a move over Philip Menard as well. So, and this one ended up taking place then, as we go on board with the Mustang. As we flawn down, this surely is a mistake from the South African, because in towards turn 1 they go. Huge old distance between him and the Scotsman. My goodness, he almost wiped out Carnateur entirely. I'm sure McLaren had his heart in his mouth there as he saw the Mustang come flying up towards his rear diffuser. It's not exactly a small car, or a very intimidating one as well. But apparently, Timo Karppinen do it to, well, certainly manipulate the reactions of other cars in the field, and forcing cars to pit earlier than they would have liked. Now, how does that work? So, currently, Timo Karppinen, after he has emerged out of the pits, which he's doing just now, he is on fresh tyres compared to everyone else in the server, other than Makowski and Van Thielen, that have pitted behind him. Whilst he is on these tyres, he can start to push on around what is definitely a grip-dominated circuit, and put in some lap times that should allow him to lap quicker than those that are still out on track. Once those guys then pit, Timo Karppinen then has the opportunity to jump up the order and benefit from this undercut and get track position. Downside is that these tyres will of course be in a worse state later on in the race. Now, either if you've got a car that can accommodate that, a driving style that maybe helps nurture the tyres over the course of the race distance, or if the overall wear rate and impact on lap times isn't too catastrophic, it is definitely a strategy that you can and may work. But could be a tricky one, and I have to say that so far not many of those. We've had Pozniakov has come into the pits. Not many drivers, though, have looked to react. So right now, Timo Karppinen hasn't particularly forced anyone's hands, but he could be looking to move his way up the order without a shadow of a doubt, and it'll be a case of how good is his defense game later on in the world. And did I know that Jack Alexander is in South Africa as well? I did not. So I'm assuming that he is still Scottish, and that I haven't misunderstood on that front. But that he is residing then in South Africa, and where he's competing from. I think it's so amazing and fantastic about previously, sim racing and online competition was quite a European dominated sort of region and things like that. We didn't have too much reach beyond that, and now we get drivers joining us from North and South America, South Africa. We've had such a fantastic range of drivers, and whilst sometimes the server connections can get a little bit on the tricky side, we do also sometimes have even those as far out as parts of Asia as well. So it really does show the worldwide scale of low fuel motorsport and sim racing as a platform, which I think is just so magical and wonderful. And this little niche that we've come to know and love is certainly growing, and it is a wonderful journey to be a part of as it does so. Valentin Barra comes into the pits, and he will be looking, trying to undercut some of those other cars ahead, so not many cars coming into the pits as it stands, whilst Korekas continuing to apply the pressure to Nicholas Huben, but not quite able to make his way past the Aston Martin just yet. As he stands, he moved to South Africa. Fantastic. Certainly a bit of a jump and a half. And I imagine, well, maybe, I would say maybe overall better weather. That obviously I'm not sure quite whereabouts in Scotland that Jack sort of grew up and where he was residing there, but certainly not well known to have the kindest of conditions. I think in South Africa, pretty extreme environment as well at each end of the scale. But I'd say, at least, especially for at least the good days in terms of warm weather, that maybe it's worth it over there. And fantastic that Jack able to continue competing in low fuel motorsports from so far away from his homeland, and he is doing a great job in the server once again. He's sitting P6 as it stands at the moment. Maybe would have expected a little bit more. Of course, the competition out front is very fast indeed, but Jack Alexander's often is the benchmark, especially when it comes to one-lap pace and all of these custom BOP bits of work that goes into getting this racing as close as it is. And the number 17 car often is one of the benchmarks at the pointiest end of that equation. Again, no cars from the top 10 coming in on this occasion, so they will continue on round as we approach our way towards the halfway mark of this race. If you are enjoying this fantastic round as we go into the first third of the season, 15th season of the Case King Pro Series, then do consider giving the channel a follow. We are just 12 followers away from 3,800 here, and that goal is making our way towards 4,000 is just getting ever closer. It's just so wonderful and so amazing to have all of you here joining for this incredible racing that we have going on each and every week. Timo Epic undercut slower than the top 10. Timo Confident, absolute legend. That's oh wow, that was. It's not been the best lap times, I must admit, from Timo Confident. A solid 43.2. Meanwhile, your race leader at 42.4. But I'll tell you what, George Boothby, mistake on the last lap, I imagine, from the number 1 car, because he did a 43.2 there. Still faster than Timo, but a good 0.8 seconds away from the man he's been on the gearbox of since the start of the race. So it's now 2-second advantage for Michael Moning, who right now is making a lot of people very happy, managing to retain that P1 spot after that fantastic qualifying session. And now Jack Alexander comes into the pits. Any other takers? And the answer is no. Eric Del Fanta into the pits as well, just a little bit further down the order. But Michael Moning with that 2-second lead now. Let's see what's see if we can get a gauge some of those other lap times. Timo on a better lap this time around, I do believe. So he is finding some lap time now. 1.5 seconds up. Did a 42.9 last time around. His best is a 42.7. So this could... This Delta's looking a little bit ambitious to me. I'm not quite sure he's going 2 seconds quicker than he has done in his race before. We've also got Schneckenberger and Duran into pit lane as well. I think we've also had a few more pitters as well as, and yes, P1 and P2 are in a league of their own as it stands at the moment. Just must be finding some pace once again, 42.7, but Michael Moning, he is flying as it stands right now out in front. 42.5. Campanella, I think, made a mistake on that last lap. Potentially he's dropped away and lost a bit of pace. Here we go then. Timo Confident making his way on by, and he's got past Jack Alexander, I do believe. And Alexander, not quite actually. My time board just a little bit out of sync for just a moment. Timo Confident did another 0.9 on the last lap from the Bentley driver. So moving along relatively quickly, but not quite as quick as your lead pairing. And we've got Carlo there, Well, I doubted him slightly earlier, and I learned not to do that very quickly, but he certainly believes that Jack Alexander can go for a top 3, a podium position. And it would require definitely the racecraft and strategy to go his way in order to recover this. It very much depends on how much he gets the hammer down during this second stint, especially these opening few laps of the second stint. As Bukowski in the Aston Martin, applying the pressure to Mattia De Campo. That McLaren, a little bit of a hop and a skip through the chicane, straight lines the slow chicane just a bit more than the Aston Martin. Maybe a bit too much curb through turn number 9. How they fare through 11. You can see McLaren takes some of the entry curve, Bukowski not needing it, and stays more comfortably within track limits as well. As they head in towards turn 12. Both cars able to take that bit of curb, but maybe the Aston Martin not in a comfortable place when it comes to the gear ratios of that Aston Martin. He kind of felt like he was a little bit in between gears. And if you're unsure what that means, it effectively means that you can kind of use either on the exit of a certain corner, but you're taking too much speed for the lower gear to really kind of help you, but you're maybe not quite taking enough speed that the short shift into a higher gear would necessarily provide you with. So you're kind of in this tough spot where you're stuck between the two, and you can't make either happen. Michael Moning then comes into the pits, as do Ida, Walsinger, Menard, and Huben. And I'll tell you what, that is going to work out very interestingly indeed, because Michael Moning, he's protected himself now. He is not going to get undercut by George Boothby. Correctors are staying out as well. He does not need to worry about being undercut in this race. Now, Boothby, he only had a 2-second margin over Noah Reader, so he can't wait for long, I don't believe. Let's see what Jack Alexander is doing on this lap. This will be, I think, his first flying lap. So certainly his first full attack lap, having come out of the pits. And of course see whereabouts he goes in this order. So a lot of these cars, I think, actually reacting to the number 17's stop time. We've got Nutter just in front of him. He could be in a competitive spot as well. He's dealt with some of the traffic. The likes of Huben Menard, wheels down and on the way. But where do they all fare from here? Michael Moning out on track. He will return back into the lead of this race. Going to be close between Walsingham and the turn. Actual fact is easily done. Oh dear, that's awkward and a bit because that's traffic. That's slow speed traffic there that gave a bit of a pinch and a squeeze on the apex of that turn. And Walsingham won't be very pleased with that one at all. But Carletet has managed to continue on. And I think he's actually managed to reclaim that position as a result of that undercut. But Boothby's still staying out. That is risky. That is very risky. Carreras now comes into the pits as well. George Boothby clearly wanting strong tyres. We've done it. He's done it several times before, and it is a strategy that has worked out very nicely for him, and it's brought him into contention in races time and time again. Clearly feeling like he needs that bit of a performance delta to Michael Moning, but I'm surprised he didn't go for an undercut. Very surprised he didn't go for an undercut, because that certainly could have allowed him to move up position, but instead he will continue on. And after these other cars come out of the pits, it will be Michael Moning that leads the way. It's a 3.3 second gap between himself and Noah Reader. He's actually lost a little bit of time, I think, in that. Maybe a very fast stop or very fast kind of in-out pit time for Noah Eder. Maybe a bit on the slower side for Michael Moning. Did have some margin to work with, though, and he was effectively undercutting relative to George Boothby. He didn't really have to worry too much about losing track position. George Boothby, though, he's got to be careful about how long he stays on these tyres. He did a 42.9 last time around. Carpenter, same pace, so his fresh tyres not actually seemingly helping a great deal. So maybe the undercut not all too powerful. Conditions seem relatively static. We've got zero wind optimal as George Boothby now comes on in to pit lane. We'll go on board on the pit entry as well. because it's just as competitive as the rest of the lap. And you could see how much George Boothby fighting the car there. And flying on down, gets the speed scrubbed off and on the limiter. But now, question is, does he hold on to P2? I can't tell if Michael Moning has lost time or if Noah Ida has gained time. And Boothby, pretty decent entry into the pit lane. I certainly wouldn't say it was optimal, but it was certainly on the attacking side. You can see he's the very last car in the box and waiting for his mechanics to do their thing. Meanwhile, whilst he is waiting for them to do their thing, Moning and Boothby ate their Wheaties this morning. It certainly looks like it, that they have gotten that energy and all those vitamins through their body dialed in and putting in some strong laps and pace. But we'll check about the cars that are around the Michael Moning, of course, pitted from the lead, wanting to cover off the undercut. A fairly convenient and okay point, to be fair. Around the halfway point, there goes Boothby. Where is Michael Moning? It's closer than I would have thought it would be. And George Boothby, he's gained time. He's absolutely gained time. And it's not just that, it's game on as well. Of course, it will take a lap or so for those tyres to come up to temperature. But Michael Moning, after having what was over a 2-second lead from George Boothby, just imagine if he hadn't made that mistake. If he hadn't have made that mistake, George Boothby right now could be leading this race on fresher tyres. And I said, the number one car, he knows how to win races. He absolutely knows how to win races. He's the winningest driver in Case King Pro Series history. And this is why, just when you think that you might have made the right decision, so you might have the upper hand, Boothby manages to find something that just destabilizes the apple cart just a bit more. And speaking of destabilized, Michael Moning chucks across the curbs in that chicane. And George Boothby smells the blood here. Those watching at home cheering on the American, trying to make history in the 15th season of the Pro Series in front of this Veloce car. There's been nail-biting stuff to the end of this race. 23 minutes left to go. And we have got a duel on our hands. Michael Moning, who started on pole, ahead of this driver that we are on board with, George Boothby. He's led effectively every single lap of the race. A mistake from Boothby looked like it removes it potentially from the equation, especially with the undercut from Michael Moning. But an audacious attempt at this overcut seems to have come into good effect. And though those tyres, as they start to warm up, the gap's stabilising at what appears to be around the second mark, but that is half of what it was before. And now it all depends. How much has George Boothby got to work with? How much does he dare work with to try and take that position away from Michael Moning? He will be giving it everything. Meanwhile, other positions around the top 10 are in a tight spot as it stands. Nicholas Huben was applying the pressure to Grant Carreras. Couldn't quite get the job done and has actually dropped back a little bit in the process. P12 under pressure. That's Team Carpenter. Of course, those tyres maybe starting to struggle and get away from him. He's in the 43 zeros as it stands. Oh dear. That is a full half second to 0.6 of a second loss. Oh dear. Half second to 0.6 of a second loss to those around. And whilst it's maybe not quite as comparable, George Boothby, not really the ideal line through the chicane, so he's still having to push. Michael Moning has got George Boothby a little bit on the ropes here. It's not easy said and done, and this tyre advantage, it is notable, but it isn't exceptional. You see how hard George Boothby was pushing there, using all the track a bit more. He lost about 0.8 of a second. It looks so calm from the outside of the car, but you could just tell the way that it flowed through that corner. And the gap is now up briefly to 1.5 seconds. So Michael Moning, a bit between his teeth. He's done the vast majority of the hard stuff. He's just got to try to keep it together out in front, and he could well be on his way to being a race winner in the Case King Pro Series. Meanwhile, Henrik Gamble desperately trying to fight his way towards the top 10. He can see the cars pretty much in reach, but as of right now, he has that big bad Bentley in the way. As meanwhile, Aiden Walsingham trying to reclaim the position over Carl Nitter. These two were scrapping earlier on. Nitter goes around towards the inside. Yellow flag has come out for somebody. That was Zach Duran that seems to retire the car. Aidan Walsingham still almost to the inside. Has the nose chopped off, though. And now it's game on because Jack Alexander has a huge run out of turn 3. Trying to make the move stick. Can't. Losing a bit of momentum. And then has to fight at another corner and wait for another opportunity to come his way. Almost comes his way on the run towards that chicane in the middle sector. Turn 6 and 7. Tidy line from Jack Alexander. It's not quite enough to rein in the Mustang and McLaren up ahead of him. A couple more corners, excuse me, a couple more cars are in some increasingly intense scraps. That carpet and gamble barrier fight all very close, and pit window has now closed, so drivers then unable to do anything else in terms of dynamics and drama for the strategy. Doesn't look like we've got much on the way either. Oh dear, something's kicked off somewhere as we've got Bischoff and Schneckenberger side by side. It looks like Marco Bischoff. Oh, I thought he was going to lose it out then. Meanwhile, Martin Lawrence is the Bentley watching these two scrap away. I'm not sure. Oh, that was so close. Bischoff ended up going around the outside of Schneckenberger, who now has the Bentley of Lawrence to his inside. Is he going to get overtaken? He's certainly... Oh, that's a shoulder barge and a half. And Martin Lawrence just about keeps it together in the braking zone, but I don't think this fight is done just yet. And Martin Lawrence is not going to be all too pleased about that one, I imagine. Does get a heck of a shoulder barge towards turn 13. And now Slipstream had a big bit of power as well under the bonnet of this Bentley towards the first turn. He's going to break towards the outside line. Defense line taken from Schneckenberger. Goes on the over and under. You just can't get the traction in this Bentley. It's not an easy car to do that overtake with, not unless you have very fresh tyres and if you want them to last very well at all. George Boothby on the attack once more, putting those fresh tyres to good use, has found a second. Once again, excuse me, it has managed to get that gap down to a second. And also sets the fast lap of the race with it as well. Henry Gamble, I think the only BMW in the server. A car that not too long ago was dominating certain places. And, of course, Niels Narks took this car to championship victory just a couple of seasons ago. Henrik Campbell, though, trying to find a way around Timo Karppinen as George